Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here to preview SEC basketball action on Wednesday, January the 4th. Let's start with Auburn going to Georgia, Blake. We've made much of Auburn not playing up to maybe what we thought Auburn would be. We've also talked a little bit about Georgia being 10-3, which was, I think, 4 more games than the Bulldogs won a year ago. Positive things happening in Mike White's tenure early at Georgia, albeit not against a great schedule. I think Auburn's been on the road a ton. It has been on the road a little bit. I remember it got a big road win a couple of weeks ago. What are we thinking about this as Auburn goes to Athens on Wednesday night?
Yeah, I mean, Auburn's only road win is at Washington, and I mean that's
one more than some teams in the league have, though.
true. But I mean, Washington, I don't think it's that great. So I don't know. I mean, I mean, the way they won it was more impressive than anything else. They did win that game by 23, but they played that game at USC, lost that one, the neutral court game against Memphis, and lost that one. But you could even look at the game against Northwestern, right? They won 43-42. That was a neutral court game, but so I mean, yeah, I mean, we've over the years, right? Auburn's played better at home. I mean, just with how good you can say the same for a lot of teams, right? So I don't think that's really that different. But this is kind of an interesting road game to me because Georgia's better, but I still don't think Georgia's. I think they've still got a ways to go in terms of where they're at. I don't. This is a weird one because I think you look at kind of the setup here, and like you said, I mean, Auburn's coming off a close win against Florida. Yes, I mean, we've talked about kind of the guard play at times and just maybe not getting to that next gear offensively. But I still think the way they play, like I said, they're an elite defensive team, and Georgia's still. I still don't know if Georgia. I don't really know exactly what Georgia's offensive identity is just yet. Like we know they have some guys that can score, but I still think they're against a team like this in Auburn that defends the way that they defend. I think that's what you probably want to see more of from Georgia because in terms of like defensive teams they played, right? Like this is the best defensive team they played this season, and
Yeah.
you may be able to go as far as to say far and away the best defensive team they will have seen this season, just based on the teams they played to this point. So I think that's something to keep in mind here is, and look, I'm not trying to knock either team, but I think this does feel like a more defensive minded game just based on the strengths we've seen of both teams. And so I think that actually maybe plays a little bit in Georgia's favor because again, I think this will be kind of a closer, grinded out type game. I know we use that phrase a lot, but that's just the way SEC games are played. I mean, we said it in the previous video. I don't remember what it was, but there's a lot more good defensive teams in this league than there are good offensive teams. And
Yeah.
so I think this is kind of one of those games to me with how it sets up is yes, it's another true road game for Auburn. Haven't played a ton of those, but like you said, a lot of SEC teams haven't either. Georgia's unbeaten at home, but it's who they played. I mean, can you really put a lot of stock into that? I don't think so. Um, but here's the thing: like 1 through 7, I just think Auburn's the better team, and I think that they have more. I just think they have more options in terms of like how they can win this game versus I think for Georgia, um, said solid defensive team, okay offensive team, but like I still don't know what if you're looking at Georgia, right? Like what's something that you feel like that they just they're great at to this point, and I think the schedule is one of those things, and I just meaning I still don't know how to fully form an opinion on Georgia just yet, based on the fact that I know they played 13 games, but like they haven't played the strongest schedule. Like I said, they're better than they were last year. There's no question about that. Mike White's doing some good things. We talked about that. We're not surprised at all. But this is their first really big test against an Auburn team that I know has struggled to score. They struggled to shoot the three, all the things we mentioned, and that can come into play here. But I still think from top to bottom, Auburn's the better team.
Well, there's some interesting things with Georgia here. Terry Roberts Jr., or Terry Roberts, I don't think he's a junior, who transferred, I think, from Bradley, is their leading scorer, which I wouldn't have really expected. Although you've seen Bridges and Okendo have their minutes limited a little bit. I guess there's been an injury there. Bridges was playing like 4 minutes back in a couple of back-to-back games in November. I mean, Georgia basketball kind of was flying way under the radar then, so I'm not finding much about that. Oquendo missed a couple of games, Florida A&M and Hampton. So, one thing you can say about this Georgia team is presumably it'll be a little bit more at full strength than it's been. Bridges has been one of the more underrated players in the league for a couple years now. The problem is that I've said this many times. I think Auburn's got a very underrated front court, not just in terms of their starters like Broome, but the kids that they bring off the bench. We talked about shooting efficiency being an issue sometimes with Auburn. I think it's more an issue with Georgia. And I'm looking at the spread here, which we don't have, is we do this on Tuesday morning, Blake. But what we have is an idea based on what the computers are spitting out. And taking basically Ken Pomeroy, Bart Torvik, BPI, and Sagarin and factoring for home court, this is what's a little surprising. Georgia is only about a 4.5-point underdog in this one. What do you think about that? I mean, I feel like Auburn's going to win it by more than that, but the computers pretty much across the board are saying this is going to be kind of a closer game.
Well, once again, I don't think anyone should be shocked by that because Auburn is not an overwhelming offensive team. In this kind of setting, I don't think. On the road, playing a team that, again, I think will probably they're not going to slow this game to a halt by any means, but I think, it will maybe be played more at Georgia's type of style, which we know with Mike White that with this team in particular, that tends to be one where, they're not a team probably that's going to, they're not going to play an Alabama type style or anything like that. Like we understand that.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not surprised because look, I mean, and I know Auburn fans probably get tired of this, but what else do we say? Like the numbers are what they are. The shooting, whether it's 3-point shooting, free throws, and the turnovers, the percentages still lean towards Auburn struggling in all three of those areas. And so I think when you have a team like that, again, I know when I say that they don't have that next gear offensively.
Like the numbers are what they are. They're 323 in 3-point shooting right now. And again,
Right.
the issues that have popped up this year were things that kind of derailed Auburn's season a year ago. And I don't think you have to apologize for pointing that out.
No, but I understand, like, there are some I know people get frustrated with that sometimes. It's like, "Well,
Yeah.
we did this in this game or we did that in this game." That's great, but as a whole, these are the numbers. Like, the numbers are there to support, like, this is where things are at this many games into the season. And so, yes, like, this is not an Auburn team, though, that's gonna shoot a ton of threes. Like, that's something we have to think about too. Like, they're not great from that area, but they're
Right.
not gonna shoot a ton of them. Now, if you're Georgia, what do you wanna try to do? You better try to make them shoot as many threes as they can, because I think that's your path to victory. But when you look at some of the recent games, they shot 14 against Florida. That's great. Auburn should, that's around 15 a game. That's probably the most they should shoot right now because they're not making them consistently enough to feel great about that. A couple games before Washington, they go 8 of 17. Great. But like that's the exception more than the rule right now, based on the overall season numbers. So I think that to me is the most interesting aspect of this game. What does Mike White do defensively? Because, he's been pretty good at that over the years at times. What does he do defensively to try to kind of counter some of the things that Auburn has struggled with on the offensive side of the floor? And so I think that's kind of a fun little matchup when you look at it from that standpoint. But overall, yes, I don't know why no one should be surprised if this is a close game because remember, Auburn just won by 3 at home against a Florida team that has struggled as well this season. And so I think this will be tougher. It's an afternoon type. Well, I mean, it's not afternoon. I mean, it's what is it like a 5:30
It'll feel like
Central
afternoon.
tip? Yeah. So I mean, it's your usual a little bit earlier start time. And man, I did not expect us to spend 10 minutes on this game. So I'm going to pick Auburn, and I'm going to go with that. But I don't. No one should be surprised if this is a lower scoring, close type game because this is Georgia's first SEC game, and I think
Yeah.
they'll be ready to kind of step up and feel like they have something to prove. So.
I'm with you. As much as we pointed out Auburn's flaws, this is still a team with one of the better coaches in the country. It's a team that's still accomplished a ton. The players on this team have accomplished a ton, and I think when in doubt, you've got to go with the more proven option. I do like a lot of what Mike White is doing with Georgia and rebuilding that program, but they're just in much different places in terms of where they are as a program. And I think I need to see a little more from Georgia before I can pick the Bulldogs in a game like this. Okay, next one on the schedule. This one on the ESPNU. Oh man, could you possibly match up two more teams that have been more disappointing so far? Well, Kentucky fans say hold my beer, but Texas A&M and Florida. I don't know what to think of this one. I don't have a lot of confidence in either team. Give me some clarity here, Blake.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much of it. I mean, A&M's not beating a good team yet, so I think that's that's probably one thing I will look at here and feel like, yeah, we said they played okay at Memphis. That was a close game. But I just, yeah, to me, this is this is the SEC special of take the home team and just hope it works out. Like I feel like that's all you have to go on with these two teams because, like we said, which Florida's played a tough schedule, but all the teams they play that are in that top tier, they've lost all those games. A&M's not in that top tier because, as we said, they've got just some head scratching results. Inconsistency's been the theme for A&M this season. You don't necessarily know what you're going to get. Could you say, oh, well, look at their last two games, they're playing better. Well, they beat Northwestern State by 12 and they beat Prairie View A&M by 20. I don't know what I take away from that. I still look at this as a team that has a lot to prove, not even in the NCAA tournament discussion whatsoever. And so if they're going to get there, these are the kind of games they have to win because it's just going to take a really lot for A&M to kind of get back into that discussion of what we think is a top half team in the league. Because right now they don't look like it. And all that to say that Florida doesn't either. And, so this game could go a lot of different ways. Still one of the strengths of A&M is going to be turning people over, but Florida's actually, when you look at the numbers, Florida's done a pretty good job of taking care of the ball. So I don't know if, one kind of beats out the other in that regard, but I tend to just lean on Colin Castleton here. I know you brought up kind of the numbers recently, but I tend to think this is kind of one of those games where even though Buzz probably will have a pretty good game plan coming into this in terms of how they defend him, I just tend to think that Florida's got a nice size advantage with Castleton, and I know Henry Coleman's on the other side and such, but I just think that's probably the difference maker here. As long as they can get some consistent production out of their guards and they take care of the ball the way they have to this point.
Yeah, Will Richard's been kind of an underrated player for them, a kid who transferred from Belmont in our backyards. We're familiar with him shooting the ball very efficiently. A&M, despite the struggles, I mean, there are some good individual things here. Wade Taylor IV is having an outstanding year. Tyrese Radford's been very good. Henry Coleman's been solid in his 2 years. And A&M's got some depth. I think I'm with you. I think when in doubt, go with the home team, right?
I mean, Florida, like I said, Florida played well at Auburn. Like, we can't forget that either. Like,
Right.
they were right
almost
there with
pulled
a
an
chance to
upset
win.
there.
I mean,
Yeah.
they were right there with a chance to win. So I think that's probably what I lean on more is recent results. Again, A&M played two teams that they should have beaten the way they beat them. Florida had their chance to win at Auburn. So I tend to think there's some Florida, I think, is starting to 1 through 7, maybe 8. I think Florida's really starting to figure out here's what we have to do. And I know we're saying that with a team coming off of 2 straight losses, but to Oklahoma and Auburn, lower scoring type games, like we said, I think that's just, I just tend to think Florida's starting to figure some things out rotation wise, and Florida fans may disagree with that, but just watching them play, they've been right there, especially in that Auburn game. I think Castleton's probably the difference maker here, and if they can just get some of that solid, consistent play out of Kawasi Reeves and those kind of guys, because again, like you've got Jones, right, who just popped up and scored 10 points in the game against Auburn when he really hadn't done a whole lot. I mean, really consistently has not done a whole lot this season, but someone like Reeves, I think, is kind of that guy that can be a big difference maker. And as long as he's playing well, I think that's going to, off the bench, that gives Florida a nice boost. And like you said, Richard and those guys, that they have to hit shots, something Florida didn't do against Auburn. They're 3 of 19 from 3, but they take care of the ball, I think Florida wins this game because I just think that it's kind of one of those where I just think Florida kind of has to win this game, right? Like they're 7-6, and I think they're a better team than A&M. They're back at home, and it feels like man, we got to win this one to feel pretty good about ourselves moving forward. So before the Mike White Bowl on Saturday. So
Right. Predict sports better than the crowd for a chance to win NFTs. With stakes, players can submit their sports predictions against friends, other fans, and influencers forever. Don't let your sports genius go overlooked. Join stakes and have the best predictions captured in the moment. Go to playwithstakes.com/14. Use our invite code Southeastern14 for a double welcome bonus. Okay, the last one.
The main event.
In all honesty, probably not just the main event of Wednesday night, but probably the main event of both Tuesday and Wednesday night, with apologies to LSU and Georgia. That's Missouri visiting Arkansas. We have talked at length about Arkansas's injury issues. I would presume Nick Smith doesn't play in this one. Missouri has been red hot since suffering that embarrassing loss to Kansas back on December the 10th, winning 3 in a row and seemingly getting better with each passing win. However, this is only the second true road trip for Missouri, which beat Wichita State back on November 29th in overtime. Arkansas and Fayetteville, that's going to be a madhouse. But I do remember this time last year, Arkansas was struggling to put it together a little bit, and it took a bit. Is that where the Razorbacks are this year? It doesn't feel like they're quite there, but that loss to LSU, I think, was not what we expected either, albeit that was away from home.
Yeah, I don't. I think I've seen some people. I'm not saying you are, and we didn't because when we did our reaction to this, but I've seen some people really overreacting to that LSU loss, and I'm going to stay exactly where I stayed beforehand. I just think the reaction is because people weren't giving LSU enough credit, and I feel like we talked about it.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I realize LSU schedule was what it was, but I think they're a better team than people are giving them credit for, and to win a home game by 3 against a good team to start SEC play, I don't think should be that shocking. And I don't think it's an indictment on what Arkansas is capable of. It's just, yes, like it is kind of your first team. What do we say going into it? First true road game of the season, like for Arkansas. So, like to lose that game and, had their chances down the stretch to win it, I don't think we should be any more concerned about Arkansas than we were just by saying, what if Nick Smith doesn't play? What we know Brazil's been out for a while. I don't think that the discussion has changed all that much. Like, I still think Arkansas is the number 3 team in our power rankings. Like, I think they're still the 3rd best team in the league. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, I feel like this is kind of a reset where they get to come back home. Did they not? They play as well as they want to at LSU, of course not. But it's kind of a reset. Like I said, they come back, to Fayetteville. They play a team that's, as hot as anybody, not just in the SEC, maybe in the country, just in terms of just how they're playing, the confidence they're playing with right now in Missouri. And I've always said from the start, the defense has been bad, but I still think offensively, they are good enough to beat anybody they play. And I said that in the context of the defense has been bad kind of early in the season, but I think you're seeing some things now defensively with Missouri. They're starting to figure some things out. They're starting to, kind of make some of those tiny little adjustments that you see kind of the light bulb go off sometimes when if you just look at an individual possession, you're like, you compare that to what you saw early in the season, or even in the game like against Kansas, right? You're starting to see them pick up on some things that they realize, okay, I got to do this or I got to do that. And again, this is still a team that's turning people over, and that's important. And that's kind of the basis for their defense is they have to be able to create some of those turnovers, because that really helps as a team that doesn't turn the ball over a lot. We talked about that a lot this season. Missouri just isn't a team that's going to turn over a ton. They value the ball. They tend to get good looks offensively, and they get up and down the floor. So this is, like you said, this is the biggest game of the week, in my opinion, just based on where these two teams are at. It's fun to think about a Missouri-Arkansas basketball game being this important again, just based on where these two are at. And so, boy, it's a tough setup here for me. I mean, it's a tough prediction because, this is one that I think, look, I think something we always, and maybe we haven't talked about enough with Missouri. I know they got a lot of new faces, but when you really look at it and you think about who they're putting on the floor, they are a they are a very experienced team in terms of like age and
Yeah, they just
the
haven't all played
guys.
together for very
Right.
long.
Like, that's the thing is like Hodge, Golston, Kobe Brown, of course, like all these guys. I mean, Noah Carter, going down the list. Nick Honor. I mean, they've played a lot of valuable minutes at their former stops. And, we always say when you have a lot of transfers, it's always about the chemistry. Well, it's come together now. And so you combine all that experience with good chemistry here with how these guys play. And I think that's I think that gives this team a shot against anybody. And so, I think the default or the answer here, and remember who's talking here, the Dennis Gates' agent. But, I think by default, you're probably picking Arkansas to bounce back because it does seem hard to see them starting 0-2 and then and then having to go to Auburn, maybe an 0-3, and then going to play Alabama. Is it going to be a repeat of kind of what we saw last season? Maybe, but I tend to think Arkansas offensively can find some things here, but they're going to have to be on their A game defensively, which they have been pretty much all season. Maybe outside of the Creighton game, I guess. I think defensively, Arkansas can probably do some things to maybe frustrate Missouri a little bit, but man, it's the way Missouri's playing right now. I mean, everybody, and I know sometimes we want to, oh, well, Illinois is not as good as people thought they were. Kentucky's not as good as people thought they were. But if you watch those two games and how they just completely dissected
They
both of those
got
teams,
after it.
like they can beat anybody in the country. They can, maybe not Kansas in that setting, but you play that game again, maybe it's a little different. But I look at this Missouri team and I think they will be ready for this game. But I still tend to lean towards Arkansas based on the history, probably figuring it out and bouncing back with a win here at home. But it's this is very close for me because I feel like some people are realizing that I'm like, as the guy who was so high on Missouri, it's almost like I hesitate a little bit now. I'm like,
Getting buyer's remorse. Not,
oh
that's
no,
not
it's
the
like
right word, but
no, it's I don't want to be too overly,
right.
so I kind of try to back off a little bit, but like I said, if you can hear it in my voice, the way they've been playing is so impressive, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they go in and win this game just because of what they've done. But I feel like this is a game this is an important game for Arkansas. Not to say it's not for Missouri, because like we said, look at what Arkansas's got coming up. They got to go to Auburn. They got Bama. This is a big game for the Hogs. Meanwhile, Missouri, every game's a big game at this point. But after this, they got Vandy and A&M. So that looks a little bit better than what Arkansas has coming up. I think Muss probably gets his guys motivated to the point to where they know the challenge at hand with this Missouri offense, but maybe they make a few plays defensively and sneak out a win here.
All right, I want to give you points to ponder on both sides of this. Before I do that, very quickly, and by the way, we don't have spreads as we're doing this, but I average about 4 computers right now. They've got Arkansas is around a 10-point favorite with the home court advantage, with about a 77% chance of winning this one. By the way, I forgot to do that for A&M Florida. The computers have this as about an 8-point game, and Florida's at advantage, with Florida having about a 78% chance to win that one. So anyway, before I give you a couple thoughts, a word to our sponsor, BROTHROW. Betting $11 to win 10 stinks. So you can bet 10 to win 10 with BROTHROW, which lets you bet on all 50 states. It's not the house, so bettors have a fair chance at winning. It is the only sports platform that doesn't take a cut of every bet. No deposit money needed, no minimum bets, no need to connect your bank account. Bettors pay each other directly. It's a hassle-free sign-up process that lets you get in the action in seconds. Go to brothrow.com/SEC, brothrow.com/SE14. And once you're there, ask to join our private group under Southeastern 14. It's small, it's new, it's growing. We'd like you in there. Anyway, help out the folks who help our channel. Okay, I've made a lot of this before, and it never seems to matter. But this is a little different circumstance. We talked how Musselman has gone to or went to basically playing 5 players against LSU. 3 guys came off the bench. None had more than 7 minutes. Again, not the first time he's done this. He did this a lot last year. You'll see kids that'll go in the deep freeze for a while, suddenly thrown in and used for significant roles, and that just changes based on his taste. Again, it's worked for him the last couple of years, but Missouri is 2 things, right, Blake? It's a team that plays with incredible offensive efficiency, and it plays fast. And I do wonder how sustainable that is against a team that can play that fast and beat you this way. Does a wear and a tear factor come into this game, or does Musselman maybe go a little deeper on his bench in this one?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always a possibility. I think you probably don't have much of a choice when you get into this kind of game where you will see a couple other guys play a bit more. I think they'll have to by necessity. And I think, someone like Kamani Johnson probably has to play a few more minutes in this one. Guys like that, I think, yes, probably is the best way to put it. Because again, you kind of, it's kind of an interesting dilemma because, you need Anthony Black to play all 40 minutes. You need Ricky Council to
Yeah.
play all 40 minutes, which they did against LSU. Can they do that in this kind of game? We'll see. Because, like you said, at Missouri's, depth is not an issue for Missouri. We've said that many times. Missouri can
No.
play a lot of guys and feel like there's not much of a drop off there. So yeah, they can go 8-9 deep here, and probably, like I said, they're going to push the pace. They're going to get up and down the floor and try to force the turnovers to make things easier on the offensive end too for a team that's already really good on offense. So yeah, it's a fair question. I think that's something that can certainly pop up here for Missouri, get in foul trouble. Missouri's attacking the rim, and I don't think though Missouri shot a ton of free throws. I could be wrong about that. But when you look at those kind of things, they all matter in a game like this, and that's where again I think for Arkansas, probably Arkansas fans in the back of your mind, it's like, is this going to be kind of a repeat of last season, where you kind of get off to a slow start in SEC play, and then let's say Nick Smith comes back and you just really turn it on? Perhaps, because the schedule's not easy in these first several games. But at the same time, I think they bounce back and win this one. But you can tell my confidence getting a little bit lower as we go on here, because atmosphere will be great. Like, it's a great setup, I think, for just Arkansas being the home team here. Because quite honestly, if this game was in Columbia, I'd pick Missouri. And
Yeah.
so that's just kind of when you try to figure out games like that, that's what I always like to do. Like, I look, okay, if this was the opposite, how confident would I be in the same result? I wouldn't be confident in Arkansas winning if it was in Columbia, because I think Missouri would probably find a way to win that game. But the fact is, Arkansas is the home team. And as we said early in SEC play, when you're trying to preview these games, and we're doing this for fun when we make our picks, but it's like you tend to lean on
What you
just
know.
what you know. And I think, yes, we know that Missouri has just walloped Illinois and Kentucky in back-to-back games, but I also know that Arkansas is still a team that I think can go a long way in the NCAA tournament, and because they're back at home, slight edge here. But I'm the high man on Missouri, and it wouldn't shock me at all if they win this game.
Well, the thing I was going to bring up on the other side is Missouri's defense has gotten much better. But even in its last 3 wins, it's still given up over a point of possession, which isn't bad. I mean, it's not bad at all. It's Missouri's been, I think, between 1.03 and 1.1
Some of
in
that's
that
been in
range.
garbage time,
So
though,
it's gotten
because I mean,
well. True. But the point is, Missouri played poor defense most of the year.
yeah.
They do get a lot of steals, and we've talked about that. And maybe at this point the computers have not adjusted to everything, but there's still 150 in adjusted defensive efficiency, and how quickly can that become a habit that sort of takes for them? And is this a venue in which that sort of comes unwound, given that Arkansas is pretty gifted offensively too?
One other thing to watch in this one, rebounding, because we talked about that as another issue for Missouri at times. Arkansas is a team that, look at what they put on the floor, right? in terms of like, I think you've got a lot of guys who can kind of attack the glass sometimes and maybe give them that extra opportunity on the offensive side. So I think that's something to consider. Because does Arkansas get those second chance opportunities? Not a team that averages a lot of offensive rebounds, but that is kind of an area that's you've been able to attack Missouri in for some teams, throughout the season. But I just keep saying we're talking about a different Missouri team right now than we were, a month ago. I mean, this is such a different team with such a different mindset, and they're improving in a lot of key areas. So, all right, Chris, we better wrap this up because if we keep this going another 2 minutes, I'm going to wind up changing my pick. So
well, let
keep
me throw something
Arkansas
at you.
fans happy.
If the computers are right and the line is around 10, which I don't think it will be, I would think it would be a couple points lower than that. Who would you have?
Missouri with the points.
Yeah, I would too.
Because I just think that, like I said, I just think they're too good offensively, and that's in knowing that Arkansas is one of the best defensive teams, not just in the SEC but in the country. But I still think the way Missouri plays and the options they have, and like you mentioned some of the things that could pop up in a game like this, if if whether it's foul trouble, whether it's just the style, Arkansas having to adjust some rotations a little bit. I think those are all things you have to consider. Yeah, and I don't, that's not unreasonable because again, if anybody's watched the last 2 games, Missouri has just been fantastic against Illinois and Kentucky. I think
Hey,
Arkansas is
by the
better than
way,
both of those teams, but still.
you sent me to looking something up here. You mentioned foul trouble. Ken Palm is now doing a stat 2 foul percent participation. Missouri ranks 335 in the country there. So their guys are staying out of foul trouble for the most part, which is kind of remarkable given how fast they play and given that they're number 1 in the country in steal rate.
Yeah.
And maybe that points to depth, but whatever it is, that's pretty remarkable.
Enjoy this game because I think this will be a pretty enjoyable one just from an entertainment
TV
value. Yeah, given where both teams are at, I think this will be a lot of fun. And whoever wins it will have earned it because I think, again, you've got 2 teams that are I know, like I said, people overreact to the LSU game. I'm not with Arkansas just yet. And like I said, quite frankly, Arkansas could start 1-3 in the SEC. Maybe 0-4 if they lose
which
this game.
did last year, and it wasn't a problem.
And I don't think I'd be that concerned just because you trust the Must Bus at this point to get back on the road. And I think I trust their bounce back potential here, against a really good team. And yeah, this will be one of the more. I mean, it'll be one of the best games thus far in SEC play. It's a small sample size, but this one should be a lot of fun.
Can't wait to watch it. We'll be here to talk about it on Thursday morning. Best way to get all our stuff, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. He's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. We're Southeastern 14. We'll see you again soon.